We're going to jump right into this thing. We're going to spend a few minutes on this timing is everything test. And basically, who did take a look at this handout that I gave you? All right. Did you learn some stuff reading the handout that you think might help you understand automotive?
I'm gonna need a time machine.
Yeah, I mean, timing is everything.
No, I'm gonna need a time machine.
Yeah.
To read before Tuesday.
Yeah, and so everything was, no, that's actually, is that timing is everything?
No.
That's confused.
Did you get one of these? Timing is everything, it's a different handout.
I don't
We
know
did
what
that one yesterday.
Yeah, hand that one to him
No.
When do we have to have that thing? When it's on?
today.
Yesterday.
Yeah, this is an engine performance thing. So, anyway, basically what this guy's talking about in here is the location of crankshaft and camshaft positions must be known by the engine controller as well as their relationship to each other. So the physical position of the crankshaft and camshaft has got to be delivered by the camshaft and crankshaft sensors. Now, Adam, you're going to find this interesting because they're talking about computers there as it relates to this. But you got a variable reluctance sensor like the one on the front of that engine right over there. Basically got a piece of copper wire that's, like magnet wire that's wrapped around and around and around and around a little magnet. And you got a wire coming off each end of it. And every time one of those teeth goes by that magnet, the magnetic field moves and that creates a little wave in there. You put a missing tooth on that wheel, it gives you the position of the crankshaft. However, the position of the crankshaft is not much good unless it knows which stroke it's on. Since it turns 2 full turns, it's going to pass 2 times every time it goes through a full cycle, so it could be on compression or exhaust on each and every cylinder. How far apart are those little teeth in degrees on that wheel over there? How many degrees are there? If it's a 35 minus 1, how many degrees apart is each one of those little teeth? 35 minus 1.
I don't have one of those.
You know one of those? No. I wonder what happened to all of them.
No, I have a book. I don't have a test.
Yeah, but, you don't have a test? You don't have a test?
So did you check your box already? Because that's where they were.
Yeah, I put them in the box. All right, give me my book back, since he's already got a book. Good toss, man. All right, now, what he's talking about in here is the internal clock, right? When he gets down in here. You know, actually each one of these shafts has got a trigger wheel mounted to it. It's got little teeth on it. And as a matter of fact, I got to show you guys another little thing on the overhead here, but I will show you that in a minute. The voltage change produced by a sensor is nothing but that. So in order for the engine control module to be able to interpret the voltage range, you got to write a program. Okay, so you know how sensitive a program has to include the time. So I use an internal clock to run the software so the shaft position can be calculated. It also uses that to determine misfires and that kind of thing. So it produces pulses that set up the rate at which tasks can be carried out. Each clock pulse sets up a machine cycle that caches the registers that carry out the programming tasks. Anybody that's done any programming on a computer would be interested in that, or if you built one. Clock speed refers to the number of pulses per second generated by an oscillator that sets tempo for the processor. The clock speed in an automotive computer is usually measured in megahertz, and it'll be various different megahertz for different ones. I will tell you this, it needs to be more megahertz for one that's got an electronic throttle body than it does for one that's got a throttle cable. That's why on your Fords you see they went to the Black Oak processor so that it would have a faster controller. The older ones that first came out, like in EEC 4, was only like 1/3 of a megahertz. It wasn't very much, you know. But you got a quartz crystal. Now, right here at the bottom, how is a computer's clock constructed? Not how it's built, but how it works. Can anybody answer that? That has read the handout. How is a computer's clock constructed? Not how it's built. I mean, it's just how it's built. I'm sorry, not how it works. Remember we talking in here about quartz? When you put pressure on quartz, it makes voltage. And I don't know, I don't build cigarette lighters, but you know those little cigarette lighters that you snap them and they light, they make a little spark? There's a piece of quartz in there you're compressing that creates that little spark, you know, the way I understand it. But
So does it use like a piezoelectric?
yeah, vaguely, yeah. What you're looking at here is, you're looking at, it's a thin little piece of quartz, and at the end of the quartz, the surfaces are metallized in order to attach electrical connections. So when you attach electrical connections on it and you put voltage to it, a very, very constant voltage that cannot change, it's got to be the same all the time, then you've got a very evenly vibrating piece of quartz, and basically you got little voltage fluctuations and all that. You can read a little more about that in the handout because it goes very well. Okay, so the crankshaft position sensor enables the PCM to calculate what and what of a shaft. If you're looking at a shaft and you're basically got a sensor connected to that shaft, what are you most concerned with in regards to that shaft? What do you need to know? If you're an engine controller, what do you need to know? You need to know what and what. Two different things. I need to know how fast it's going, and I need to know where it is. So I would say speed and position. Would that be correct?
Position and velocity.
Yep, that's right. Velocity and speed being pretty much synonyms. How come you didn't tell me that if you knew the answer? You knew the answer, obviously, because you given it.
Because why should I answer when no one else has done it?
Can you imagine what this world would be like if if everybody had that attitude? Why should I do it? Nobody else is doing it. Really? All
No,
right.
because last time we had this and I didn't do it or whatever, you kind of snapped at me, so.
Yeah. Oh, so now it's my fault. Okay. All right. The camshaft position sensor will allow the PCM to calculate what? What do you think? What we were just talking about a minute ago, you got 720 degrees of crankshaft rotation, and your camshaft is only going to rotate. How fast does the camshaft turn in relation to the crank?
Stroke of the crankshaft.
Camshaft, the gear on the camshaft, is it bigger or littler than the one on the crank?
Littler.
No. The crankshaft gear is usually about this big around. The camshaft gear is about that big around, so it's twice the size. So for every 360 degrees the camshaft turns, the crank turns 2 times. Now that's necessary because of the way your valves have to work, right? So if your piston's going up and down, and it's going to go up and down 2 strokes for every time that the valves work once, you're going to be turning half the speed of the crankshaft with the camshaft. You can build engines. I built engines and transmissions for years without even being able to tell you how they'd work. I could take them apart and put them back together, but I mean, as far as it came down to just telling you exactly every little thing about them. And when you start learning how they work, it just makes you a lot better at figuring out what's wrong with one. So number 4, why does the ignition timing need to be advanced as the engine speed increases? If the spark event's too early or too late, engine efficiency will drop. Okay, so whenever fuel droplets begin to burn, you got to recognize the fact that they're always going to burn at the same speed. You got me? In other words, whenever fuel starts to burn, when oxygen starts to unite with it because of the spark, it's not going to burn any faster when you're driving down the road than it is when you're sitting there idling. Okay, so with that being the case, if you want the maximum amount of pressure to be applied at the right time to give you the most power on the crankshaft, you're basically going to need it to fire earlier so that whenever it's doing its expansion, it's happening right when it needs to. Now, whenever you're driving down the highway and you're floating along about 55 miles an hour and you just got your foot laid on the gas and you're maintaining your speed on a flat road, ignition timing is going to be from 45 to 60 degrees before top dead center because the engine's not loaded. However, when the engine's loaded, if you get something like a scan tool that you can watch the timing, and it'll actually give you the timing on most scan tools nowadays on cylinder number 1. It doesn't give it to you on all the rest of them. You can put it in gear and you can brake torque it so that it's got a heavy load, and you'll notice as you brake torque it that the timing initially starts to go up and then it levels way back off. And if you really stand on it when you're brake torquing it, like if you're doing a stall speed test on a transmission torque converter, you're going to see it go down to 0. I mean, the timing can actually go down to 0 when it's under a heavy load. That's to prevent pinging and stuff. All right, number 5. On port fuel injection system, the injector is open when the intake valve is in what position? When should you open the injector? When is the only position the intake valve can be in?
Closed.
It's got to be closed. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to do it any other time. And what I've always maintained was that on these cam sensors, they make their cut at 24 degrees after top dead center because, what I had read in some early publications whenever they first came out with cam sensors on cars was that the fire has all gone out by the time you're hit about 25 degrees after top dead center, or 24, because it's basically slapping the head of that piston. It's hard to verify that because you can't look in there and see what's going on. All right, so If the injector delivers the fuel too early, what can happen there? This thing talks about that. It's a really good handout, you guys. The fuel vapor at the intake valve pocket can be pulled into another cylinder that's on an intake stroke. So that messes it up. It'll cause it to do crazy things. Who was that was with me the other day that we were working on something in here? And, the Mustang. And you were working with me on that, Adam, and it had a induction induction crossfire problem. And the reason was, remember why I was doing that?
It's because two of the adjacent cylinders were,
Yeah,
wires were next to each other.
Yeah, two adjacent cylinders were right next to each other also on the cap. On a Chevrolet, it's 5 and a 7. On a Ford, it's 5 and 6, or 6 and 5 and lower. And if they're next to each other on the cap, next to each other on the engine, if you run those wires right next to each other all the way down, one wire will actually induce fire, and the next one, it'll fire the cylinder that's coming up before it's ready, and it will make it buck and jump, and it can make it ping really bad. Burn spark plugs up, and all that kind of stuff. Most people don't even know about that, unless you've worked on this, a lot of them with distributors and stuff a lot. When a voltage source is applied to the quartz crystal, what happens? The first part's right there on your question.
So
You-
what was the question?
When a voltage source is applied to the quartz crystal, what happens?
Piezoelectric effect.
Huh?
Piezoelectric effect. Piezo, whatever.
Yeah, that's good. Good answer. There you go. That's what I was after. Now then, finally, these waveforms down here. Can you identify these waveforms? These little waveforms right here. Can you identify any of the waveforms based on the stuff you've seen on the scopes in here in the shop? You guys have done worksheets that have some of these waveforms on them.
One looks like a crankshaft.
Which one, 4? That's
Yeah.
correct. 4 is crankshaft. You see 3?
I know I've seen it before.
We had a worksheet on that before, and you actually saw it, but it was stretched out a little more. That's the cam sensor. Now that's a variable reluctance cam sensor. Some of them got Hall effect cam sensors that got a square wave. This one here, and more commonly now, you're going to see at least in my experience, you're going to see a variable reluctance. Now those top two, 1 and 2, those are ignition coil primary. You might notice that they got a little bucket, and that's basically giving you a little bit of saturation. That's when when it drops down, the bucket would be when the points close. Whenever the points open, if you're you call it points, it's actually a transistor and all that. It's going to spike up, and you can actually look at primary and tell as much by looking at primary about what's going on as you can looking at secondary, really. Now down on the bottom, if this is a 4-cylinder, what are those bottom 4 going to be? Number 5, this points to all 4 of those.
Are those spark plugs?
Injectors.
No.
That's what those are. Those are basically going to be injectors. The little bucket that you see on that is how long the injector's open. You're going to have about a 50-volt spike when the injector snaps back shut again, because you're collapsing the field and it's sweeping across those couple windings. And so if you're going to look at an injector, you're basically going to be doing that. So go ahead and fill out those, and then we're going to move ahead.